Kenneth Crawford and Hval Olsen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, thank you.
A bunch of mnemonicans in one room. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not sure if we've done that before on the podcast. It might be a first.
Best one then.
100%
Best one.
internal.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first? Introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Anders.
All right. My name is Hval Olsen. I'm the subject lead matter at Information Security Management Implementation here at Mnemonic, working in the Governance, Risk and Compliance Department. Been doing that for 3 years now. Before that, I have experience with auditing of information security from the Big Four.
Ooh.
Indeed. And the last year, I think I've been working with what we're going to talk more about today, which is the CMMC here in Norway.
Cool, cool. So you drop the suit, but you still have a button down.
Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, it's a casual.
Casual. Kenneth?
Yes, my name is Kenneth Crawford. Been at Mnemonic for just over a year now. Very happy here, very happy in Norway. But before I came to Norway, I was in the United States, worked mainly defense contracting. My previous employer is a small company named Lockheed Martin. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe not.
I feel like I've heard of them, yeah.
You know, so it's funny to me how many people haven't heard of Lockheed in Norway, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That means we're not focused on, you know, guns and bombs.
Yeah,
but
that's
in the
probably a good
U.S.,
thing. Yeah.
it's basically Stark Industries, if you Iron Man. Yes, I worked at Lockheed Martin as a cybersecurity manager. Before that, I was at Northrop Grumman as a cybersecurity manager. And way before that, I was just a regular cybersecurity engineer at General Dynamics. Suffice it to say that my background is U.S. defense and defense contracting in the cybersecurity arena. I've been at Mnemonic working with Anders a lot on a CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. We will be using a ton of acronyms tonight, and we will try our best to explain every one of them at least one time. But you'll have to forgive us for the alphabet soup that you're about to hear.
We're used to acronyms in the podcast.
Good.
I just go like this.
Yep. Fair enough.
I don't understand anyway.
I'm more worried about our listeners than you.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
It's like 50% of being a consultant is knowing all of the acronyms.
The acronyms,
Yeah.
The other 50% is button down.
Maybe, yeah. All right, so CMMC. Who wants to explain that one real quick? First of all, acronym.
Yes, Cybersecurity Maturity Model. Certification. I always leave off the certification. Yeah.
Cybersecurity Maturity
Model. Certification.
Cybersecurity has one word.
Yes.
If I add all those letters together, it does not make CMMC, but that's okay.
I can discuss that forever if cybersecurity should be 1 or 2 words.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll give a brief overview of it if that's okay. Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, henceforth known as CMMC, is a certification that the United States Department of Defense has been putting into place for the past few years with the intent of getting the smaller private company suppliers some kind of certification, a guideline of what they need to do to secure their networks. The goal of CMMC at its most high level is to protect what's called controlled unclassified information, or CUI. CUI is not classified information. It is unclassified information that is still interesting. Sensitive, might be considered interesting to adversaries of the United States or its allies. So you can see why we would need to protect this information.
For example, like food transportation to troops or something like that.
Absolutely. Or you see barriers out in front of official buildings. How heavy are those? What kind of impact can they take?
Okay.
Because you can't drive a truck through it, but maybe you can if you know what kind of truck you need.
Yeah.
So that type of information is what would be considered CUI.
And there's a lot of it. There's a lot.
So much.
Yeah, so much. Yeah.
The best guidance I ever got was from a lady at the DoD when we were asking for a definition of CUI, and she said, if you would be uncomfortable talking about it in a bar to a Russian or anyone who would be considered an adversary of the U.S., it's probably CUI.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, Anders, what is this? What does it actually mean?
What it actually means is, well, it's a certification that really comes from regulation in the US, and it puts a lot of requirements to do security. And we can talk a lot about the level of requirements and how what is the maturity here. But as a whole, and my point of view here in this podcast will really be to talk about the Norwegian or the international point of view. It is new security requirements that we now need to adhere to, and that is the main point of it.
And why do we care about that on this side of the world? America's long ways away.
Yeah, that's a good question. The fact is that if we talk about Norway specifically, we deliver a lot of services to the U.S. defense sector, a lot more than we ever could imagine, actually. And not only Norway, but there's a lot of other countries that does this as well.
Like one or two companies in each country. So have like a.
It's huge. It's so huge. And of course, you heard about the giants, right? But we have a lot of small up-and-coming companies as well. And what CMMC really does is to ensure that all of this control unidentified information, CUI, unclassified, almost, is secured in a sufficient manner, and that goes down the whole train. So if you ever touch the information, the requirements also are set to you as an organization. So that's how we heard about it in Norway first a year ago.
So you have NIST, you have ISO, you have CMMC now. Is this going to be something like all the rest of those? Like you have to get a certification to be able to do business with certain entities? For if you're going to deliver services to the US, it's quite certain that you need to have this certification as well. There's a huge discussion to see if you can reuse your certification in some way to ensure the other ones.
Yeah, so you don't have to create something entirely new. That's just still discussion that is ongoing, but it's a good way to see it, or at least in Norway, see it compared to ISO. Because that ISO 27001 is a certification. NIST, however, haven't really been a certification per se.
It's a framework, whatever.
It's more like a framework, But now you actually get that piece of paper that says you have done this, and you have the third party or an external party that ensure that you actually do this. And that's a very key element to this, that you can actually both say that you do it, but also have an attestation that shows that you do it.
And wasn't there something about like who can do it? Like it's an American citizen to be able to.
So yeah, that is probably one.
Is that why we hired you?
No, actually, yes, that's true. No, that's not why I got hired. I hope just because of my citizenship. But that's one of the key challenges we are going to run into outside the continental United States. Is when a third-party attestation is required, it must be done by what's known as a third-party assessment organization, or a C3PAO, another alphabet soup item. But yes, a third party that has been certified as good enough themselves. They have to pass a CMMC certification, and then they have to get accredited to be an assessor. So there's people known as assessors in this organization. The people must be American citizens, and the company must be American owned.
Okay.
So very interesting and very non-compatible with a globalistic view of NATO and American allies and things like that.
Is that done on purpose to keep non-American vendors out of that little circle of Americanness?
That's a good question. So there's been a lot of finger pointing and about conflicts of interest within this ecosystem. And that's been one of the accusations that has been levied against these organizations. However, I feel it's just an oversight.
Yeah.
But like Anders mentioned earlier, we're talking about, or the US DoD is talking about reciprocity between countries as well as between certifications.
Okay.
So there's this whole new CMMC 2.0, which we can dive into when we're ready. But in the 2.0 announcement, the Department of Defense specifically said reciprocity between nations. What that looks like, they did not define. They haven't defined reciprocity between certifications either. So we'll see.
Speaking of define, what does reciprocity mean?
Reciprocity is saying that what you think is good enough as to what I think. So if you certify someone, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's good question.
How far down the supply chain is this supposed to like go?
Can you imagine like
if you see a pipeline or a decision tree or any kind of tree, you can see the leading giant, the prime, if you so want to call it
The
that.
prime, yeah. That'd be like Raytheon or the big boys, yeah.
The
Prime
big
contractor.
one, the big one.
Yeah.
On the top, and they get requirement.
Okay.
And they have their CUI, and that goes down the pipes and the tree. And it goes to one organization. And that organization use another organization for some of the service delivery that also touch that CUA data. And they again have a sub-provider that also does something for that service, that also touch the CUA data or have access to it. So as long as you have access to the CUI that additionally is owned by the prime, you also have to adhere to the requirements. So the flowing of it all goes quite deep. And you can also compare it to GDPR. GDPR is a topic that we all love to talk about, and
love so much.
And it's the same there. Because if you look at the personal data and how it flows, it's the same thing.
Touches a lot of places. Yeah.
If you just have logical access, then it's the same thing. Then you need to adhere to the same requirements as the first one, and it's exactly the same here. So, and that's why we, as international companies, are hit, because although the requirements are mainly towards these prime contractors, it also affects all of us other small that in some way deliver something to the prime contractor.
I'm gonna do something really mean. Do you have an example of like how far down that could go?
Well, we were talking about some good examples.
Yeah.
I think the good example you came up with, Kenneth, with the airplane and the bolts.
Sure. I imagine most people are familiar with the F-35. Big new airplane, highly complex.
Extremely loud.
Extremely loud, very, very cool. I mean, it's super cool. But so this is a huge airplane that the Department of Defense has ordered from Lockheed Martin. Well, Lockheed Martin has 2,000 subcontractors. And one of them, let's say, is to make the wings. And I'm making stuff up. This is not real, but it's a good example. That wing contractor has to bolt the wings on, but they don't want to make bolts. They only make the carbon fiber. You know, they're really high end, but they need some just regular old steel. So they could talk to another provider for steel bolts. These guys are like, yeah, we can make those steel bolts, and they order their metal from a refinery because it has to have certain purities. And all that information about the purity of the metal, from Lockheed Martin to the wing guys to the bolt guys to the metal guys, is CUI. So now you've got some foundry in somewhere in Pennsylvania where they don't even have computers. You know, it's all just guys pouring hot metal or something. That guy has CUI responsibility and CMMC requirements. That's not even an extreme example. You could even go farther down. An interesting example is, let's say, Domino's Pizza. How are they a supplier to the DoD? Well, a famous story is the night before Desert Storm launched, you know, way back, early 90s, I think. People knew it was about to happen. And the way they knew it was about to happen is at the Pentagon, there were pizza deliveries every 5 minutes all night, because everyone was there launching an invasion of Iraq and they were hungry. So pizza guys showed up. That's the example you mentioned about food delivery. That could almost be considered CUI, and today it might be considered CUI. So it was
because it shows that something's going on, because there's people coming over here now.
Exactly. And it's not classified that you order a pizza, but the reason why you did it might be, or the reason that 500 potatoes were ordered at this remote site where there's no people. Why did they suddenly need 500 potatoes?
Norwegians were there. Obviously.
A small family gathering, yes.
3 people.
But yeah, those are just a couple of the examples of what could be CUI and how far down it can go.
Yeah, more realistic, or it is realistic examples, of course. But if you are provided that let's say deliver a radar system or something more technical as a component to a flight, something that is more hands-on, for sure, that's you're a company that is going to be hit by CMMC.
So, but basically, this is an attempt to secure the supply chain. For America's defense military complex, whatever they call it.
Right.
Which sounds great. I mean, obviously that's great.
Yeah.
I think, is this something kind of off topic, is this something that's you think is gonna spill over to other industries, not necessarily the defense one, but can you see CMMC being adopted by the banks or the energy companies, or just to start like, hey, we like that CMMC thing, just implement this for everything now?
I can tell you from a U.S. government perspective, many non-defense agencies, such as NASA, are strongly considering including CMMC requirements in their contracts. I've already had a number of our clients that are not related, banking type clients, bring up CMMC because it exists and it's in the news and they're seeing it. I would be surprised if some industries didn't adopt it.
But I mean, is it like that much different from what all the other stuff we're used to and you're used to in the GRC world, Amish?
Well, it is different, but it really comes on the perspective from where the company come from. So the thing about CMMC, it has some relevance to the American frameworks. So if you take the NIST frameworks, such as NIST CSF or 800-171 or 853, you have those kind of frameworks that really have a good synergy, and there's a lot of controls that are even one-to-one, and you can even argue that 800-171 is really much the same as CMMC because it's based upon just that. So companies that do have knowledge about NIST is in a great advantage when it comes to CMMC.
So what are like the biggest challenges going to be actually making this happen for a company that needs to do it?
Well, I think from a starting point, it really comes from where you start. The issue with Norway is that NIST have just started to grow in population or like popularity. NIST like 2 years ago started with a thing. Before that, it was just used at some few companies. And in Norway, we had ISO, the ISO 27001 standard, and there's a lot of different terminology there, and different ways to do things, and different ways to explain things. If you don't ever have read a NIST or any American kind of framework and you read it for the first time, you're going to be confused.
Interpretation problems, maybe.
Yeah, and it's going to refer to things that you never heard about, like FIPS technology or cryptation, or it's different user handbooks that you never heard about, and it's going to be a lot of things that you need to really sit down and read and understand, and it will require time to just do that. And not just talk down on the frameworks that we use here in Norway, but I would say that the US frameworks are more complex and more technical.
I've never worked in GRC, so I don't really know what ISO 27001 is, but I've heard about it a million times. And I've understood that like it definitely didn't, it's never been popular. So I'm not gonna say it grew in popularity, but customers kind of had to or organizations had to comply to that to be able to sell their stuff to their clients. This is kind of the same thing, potentially.
Sort of, I would say.
I would say it's exactly. You can't get a contract without being compliant first.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a big issue because it's an ultimatum really that has been set now. So if you deliver services in the defense sector and don't have it, then we will find someone else that has the certification. But it's more like an ultimatum. With ISO, I would say that you have always had this choice in some way. I would say there was an ISO boom in the early 2000s. And 27001 is just one of the many certifications that they offer. If it is information security or quality management or cloud security or privacy or whatever. But those have become a more statement used to say that, yeah, we care about information security. You can say like use as a foundation to create a trust with the customer, while the CMMC is something that either you have it or you don't. It's a deal breaker.
So all these companies in Europe and around the world that are delivering to the primes, either they get this done by date X or they find a new customer, I guess, or they live without having the U.S. defense as a customer, which is probably not I would assume all those companies, that's their main customer, that's their main goal.
Yeah, for a number of them, you're right.
Yeah, and when is that date?
That's a really great question. So when we had CMMC 1.0, that date was 2025.
Okay.
It was a phased rollout. We don't need to get into it because that's gone. Because CMMC 2.0 came out this month, November 2021.
Yeah.
And this one will take effect as soon as rulemaking is complete. Rulemaking is a legal process within the United States, but that's going to take between 9 and 24 months.
Oh, so quicker though.
Quicker, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what a lot of people think
never
we
heard
have more time, but we don't.
I've never heard anybody say that the U.S. lawmaking process is quick.
It's less slow. Let's put it that way.
Less slow than 2025, actually. I guess.
Exactly. So in less than 2 years, CMMC will be a requirement in every Department of Defense contract.
So if you're listening to this right now and you have a customer that is a customer or has a system that is related to CUI,
yeah,
stress.
Think about it. Yes.
Yeah.
It's most of it's somewhat easy, but a lot of it's really hard.
Back to CUI. What does that mean in Norwegian standards?
Yeah, so this is a headache, that for sure. We've been working closely with Forsvarsdepartementet, or the
Defense of Norway. The Norwegian defense. That's how you say it.
Yeah. And other key interest organization on just defining what CUI is in Norwegian standard, right? Because in Norway we have actually done a lot of good things when it comes to security in the Security Act, the Sikkerhetsloven, and also the NSM's grunnprinsipper for IKT-sikkerhet 2.0 that came out not very recently. So we have done a lot when it comes to the classification of everything and ensuring that classified objects and information are secure. But now we're talking about CUI, which is unclassified. But then where does that
line go?
Line?
Okay.
So what's what? And do we rely on the customer or the primes to tell us what is CUI, or do we just get these 50 lines of information and we have to decide ourselves that what's CUI? If it's CUI in American standards but classified in Norwegian standards, how does that affect us? And that's big questions, and that's things that we are working together with key organizations to really try to define this, because we need to know what kind of information we want to secure before we start implementing the security objectives.
Because that's potentially a lot more work, right, than it needs to be, or the other way around.
No, you hit on a good point, though. Scoping it correctly will drastically impact the cost of implementing it and getting certified. And if, as a country, Norway struggles with that and we make it too wide, we're going to have a bad time, an expensive time at least.
You say key organizations. Who's that? If you're allowed to say, like, who's like making those rules? Is it like Forsvarsdepartementet and the USD?
Forsvarsdepartementet, FSC.
FSC.
Other key organizations. That really, I think we are really trying to create a forum in Norway with also key customers, the big defense customers.
They're the ones that care a lot, right? Yeah.
Because they've already done it, right? Or most of it. They have people working so tight with the U.S. defense sector and probably have implemented a lot of the controls already. And
I've understood that in other countries. In Norway, you call them FFC? FSC, yeah. And then they have one in Denmark. I've been made aware of. And then I'm assuming every company with one or two of those big
they speak the language. They know what CUI is. I mean, that's defined by the DoD because they're the ones who are saying, here's a contract, Robby, and these 10 things. Well, they should be saying this.
Get it done, yeah.
These 10 things are CUI and protect them.
Yeah.
If you want to keep working with us. If you want our money, do it.
So I assume I know that there was a CMMC 1, now there's a 2.
Yep.
If nobody heard about the number 2, what's the biggest differences?
The biggest difference is it'll come faster.
Yep.
And that's really the biggest difference. They removed some of the requirements. On there's mentioned NIST 800-171, which is a framework. That is CMMC 2.0. If you are compliant with 171, you are compliant with CMMC, unless you're special. And we won't get into those details, but for 99% of all companies, that's what you need to do. That's one of the main differences. The Department of Defense has added some, I call it marketing language, because I don't really feel that it's materially different. To make it sound softer and easier, like you can have a plan for becoming compliant, or you can get a waiver. But there's always devil in the details with those things. Like, for instance, if you need a plan of action and milestones, you can't have it for the highest weighted requirements, which are, of course, the hardest things that you would want it for. And if you want a waiver, the process is too difficult and too long. So the contract you needed a waiver to get probably has already been let and finished by the time you get your waiver. Now, this is all speculation. It's not 100% defined yet by the DoD, but these are the types of things they've tried to add to 2.0 to make it more palatable to the defense industrial base, because there was a lot of complaining. Because it was really hard before, but joke's on us, it's still really hard.
Yeah, because that was really the big difference with 1.0, sorry. The requirement, if you didn't adhere to one requirement or one control, then
you're out.
You're out, yeah. But now there's some room for error or failure, so that, okay, you don't have it, but you need to write a poem or a plan of action and mitigate
milestones.
Yeah, mitigate the milestone.
Show that you're gonna fix it by doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah, by this date. Yeah.
It'd be cool if you could just write a poem though, and the poem was a nice poem.
So, yeah, everything is going to be fine.
But hey, if anybody's listening to this, but like, what do people do? You have to find somebody who actually knows this stuff, obviously, right? And mnemonic's not the only one, but there must be other companies out there that can help you be to be certified.
In the absence of more direction from the DoD, what you do is you go in and you implement NIST 800-171.
Okay.
And then you self-assess to see if you passed or if you're missing anything. And there's actually DoD guidance on doing that, on how to score yourself. And so you can use this guidance to get you 99% of the way there. And that last 1% is where you might need to look for help. The conventional wisdom, not just mnemonic wisdom, is if you don't know much about security, find someone who does.
ASAP.
It'll be cheaper in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you have to find, like you said earlier, an assessor. That's an approved assessor.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So this is the other biggest change in 2.0. If you are CMMC level 1, you can self-assess. If you are CMMC level 2, you can self-assess. Unless you're a critical program, things like the F-35 or the Ford class carrier, those will be considered critical programs. Then you must get a third party.
Okay.
And if you're CMMC level 3, you must get a third party, and the government, the US DoD, must lead your assessment. You'll know if you're CMMC level 3. Most people don't have to worry about it.
Those are people selling missiles and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd say it over and over and over and over, just to help people drill that into their head.
Start that out there. Yeah.
It's not new. It's been around. Honestly, it's been the law in the United States that if you dealt with CUI, you had to be NIST 800-171 compliant for the last 10 years.
But it had no teeth?
It had no teeth, and all people had to do is check a box on their contract saying, yes, we are. Even if they didn't know what it was.
Sales guy got to decide that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Sales guys.
Yeah.
Hey, damn. But hey, how do you see this working out? Like the supply chain, because the whole point, like going back to the start, was like secure our supply chain, right? It sounds like it's going to work on paper. Is it going to work?
From a global and from a U.S. standpoint, I think there will be growing pains, but it will work, because this is not the same, or this is not new for many U.S. companies. What do you think about Norway, Anders?
If you asked me 1 year ago, I was a bit more skeptic. I was afraid that we didn't have the NIST competence here in Norway, and I was afraid of a lot of difficult ways that they could go. But in theory, I feel like we are more prepared now. There are, of course, pitfalls. And of course, my biggest concern really comes to the differences in really the laws and regulations as well. In Norway, of course, we have GDPR. It differs between how the US are. Some of the requirements might be in the gray zone when it comes to GDPR, and how should we handle that. And of course, in Norway, it's only a gray zone, but you have other countries where you know that they have even stricter laws and regulation. We talked about Germany that has a very strict privacy law, where you can't even
Google Street View. Yeah, there's no Google Street View in Germany.
Really?
Because they're more strict regulations.
So how will that come? And because like we're talking about sending data to the US here, so and that's really against.
Oh yeah, because you got to type in what you're doing, and you got to tell everything what you're doing to the US.
Yeah. So
and those are some of the world's biggest like vendors to defense. Then.
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe we need to create organization need to create entirely new environments where they handle CUI and do the other business on another environment. That's going to be difficult, but not impossible.
I mean, I can just raise their prices to the U.S. customer then, I guess.
And that's somewhat expected, actually. The DoD's said that your cost to get certified, you can put on the contract.
Okay.
But think about if you didn't win the contract, what are you going to do with those costs? Because you can't put it on the contract you didn't win.
Them. But then again, at the end of the day, if you do all that sort of stuff, you're investing in your security posture.
You're right.
Which is healthy no matter what, I guess.
Yeah, security professionals, I guess that's what we really should be saying. It's a good idea anyway.
Yeah, but when you pay, because, okay, how much is this project going to cost, honestly?
So for CMMC 1.0, a small to medium-sized company, the few assessments that were done came in the neighborhood of $300,000. So not
3 million kroners. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we talking a Norwegian or US SME?
A US.
Okay.
So a couple hundred employees.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
But the initial assessments from the DoD was it was going to be $30,000 US, so 300,000 kroner ish, and it's 10 times more than that.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons 2.0 came out, is to help try to lower those prices. Now you can do your own assessment for most people, and it will be much lower. But the problem is going to be these difficult requirements, things like monitoring your systems, which are hard to do. And if you want to hire a staff, that's going to cost money. And if you want a third party, that's going to cost money too. To be compliant, because you must be compliant.
But these requirements, though, you said monitoring. I'm assuming that means security monitoring.
Yeah.
Right? Do they say like you have to have EDR, you have to have log management? Do they like down there?
It's more along the lines of you must log, you must monitor your logs continuously.
Okay.
Is an idea.
And it depends on what level they come at.
But, and you have to write, right? You have to level 1, 2, and 3. But it's not like a cyber insurance checklist where you could say, "Yep, I monitor my logs because I'd log in every Sunday evening and just scroll a little bit."
Well, you can if you're self-assessing.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe get away with it, but they can also audit your self-assessment.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. That's a risk. A risk-based decision you'll have to make.
And is there fines? Okay, if you say I did that and something happens to you, you get compromised by an enemy of the U.S., can they come back and say you owe us this much money because you lied to us in this assessment?
That's not in the law yet.
Because that could happen. That will happen.
It will happen.
Indeed, I think if you go in the contract and you do something or you don't do something that you state that you do, there's the issue. I think the best case scenario is that the contract is just terminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, best case.
That's best case for you, for that company that does it, yeah.
There's a U.S. law called the False Claims Act.
The False Claims Act,
and they'll come get you with that.
Yeah.
And you'll pay a lot of money.
Yeah. Oy.
So you don't want to do that. And I think that's...
Fair enough, yeah.
I think that's quite healthy because you had... I don't know how many Excel spreadsheets I've seen with 200 security controls requirements, and you write yes or no. And if you feel good that day, we'll write yes to everything and send it across, and then everyone is happy and the sale goes through. But with this, you have, in some cases, you have auditing or you have self-assessment, and you get the certification that means someone has approved or checked whatever you have answered, and at least it gives more safety and confidence in that specific statement that you actually are doing the things that you said you are doing. And I think that's important. I think that's very important.
Yep.
Well, as a sales guy that has had to answer many public tenders and fill out lots of Excel sheets where it says yes or no, the answers never, there is yes or no questions or answers. But there are answers that are kind of yeah. Da niet, as they'd say in Russian. It's
And what do you answer then?
Yes. I am cutting that part out.
Yeah.
That is not my decision. I'm the sales guy. I say yes to everything. I'm a yes man. So That's why we have a bid department and people like you to make sure that we don't
To
do
come
anything
behind
crazy.
you and
Yeah,
clean
exactly.
up, right? Yes.
Audits. Any
Audits.
closing thoughts?
NIST 800-171. I'll say it one more time. Get help if you don't know security.
As a security professional, I will take the security controls and requirements in CMMC over any other frameworks any day, because they are really good controls, and it all actually really makes you state the security status on the company.
It's not just compliance, it's actual security.
Yeah, it's actually good stuff.
It's a great distinction.
Cool.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, if anybody needs help with CMMC, they can call you.
Absolutely. Or call you, really.
Or call me, yeah.
Yeah.
Preferably that, yeah, so I can take the credit for all the great stuff you guys do.
We're okay with that.
This is the only reason I have a job, actually, so this is, yeah.
Yeah, but mnemonic is only that many people. I think it's important that every security professional really, if you haven't read about CMMC, do it. See the requirements, set into the NIST requirements and regulations.
On a Friday night with a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Don't you want to do it? Learn 10 new acronyms. That's my best Friday.
Yeah.
That's what we live. No, but I think it's important that we have the knowledge. So when it hits, we actually have the resources to ensure that we adhere to the requirements.
Yep.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll see you around.
All right.
Happy certification.
Yes.
Happy CMMC-ification. That's a bad joke to end on.
Stop.
Let's just stop here.
We're done.
Peace.